Usually when we talk about high-stakes international diplomacy, you sort of have a picture in your mind.
Right. Stuffy rooms, mahogany tables.
Exactly. Carefully drafted treaties, maybe a hushed conversation in a corridor somewhere in Geneva.
Yeah.
You are definitely not picturing a Twitter thread that reads like a feud between two teenagers fighting over a video game.
It is a jarring contrast, isn't it? But I think that that dissonance is exactly why we need to stop and look at this, because that's the world we live in now. I mean, the line between a geopolitical crisis involving nuclear powers and a social media flame war has pretty much evaporated.
It really has. And today, we are unpacking a perfect and honestly a kind of terrifying example of that. We're looking at a collision between two very different worlds.
Okay.
On one side, you have the brutal reality of the battlefield in Ukraine. We're talking life and death, freezing temperatures, drone strikes, just the whole nightmare.
And on the other side?
On the other side, you have Elon Musk on X getting into a very public, very venomous spat with Poland's foreign minister, Radek Sikorski.
And while the insults are colorful, to say the least, we have to look past the drama.
Right.
Because what this argument actually represents is a massive shift in global military technology. It's forcing us to ask a question that makes a lot of governments very, very uncomfortable.
And that is?
Who actually controls the on switch for modern warfare?
Exactly. So we've got a stack of sources today that paint a pretty wild picture. We're looking at reports on the specific exchange on X, the history of the feud between these two, which actually goes back a while, and crucially, official announcements from the European Space Conference that just dropped. Because it turns out, while everyone was watching the insults fly, the European Union was quietly making a massive move to cut Musk out of the loop entirely.
That's the real story here. The tweets are the smoke, but the EU announcement, that's the fire.
So let's dive in. The mission today is to understand how we got from, tech visionary saves the day to diplomatic incident on Twitter and what Europe is doing to build its own sovereign satellite network.
Right. And to do that, we have to start with the catalyst, the tweet that really started this whole firestorm.
Okay, let's unpack this. So Radek Sikorski, the foreign minister of Poland, he takes to X, and he does not mince words. He crafts a post that's clearly designed to provoke.
He tags Elon Musk directly.
And he says, quote, "Hey, big guy, why don't you stop the Russians from using Starlinks to attack Ukrainian cities? Making money from war crimes can damage your brand."
Wow. Hey, big guy. It's so dismissive right out of the gate.
It is.
It frames the whole thing not as diplomat to CEO, but as someone just talking down to a chaotic influence. But the accusation itself is incredibly serious.
Making money from war crimes. That is not a subtle jab. That is a sledgehammer. But is this just like Sikorski venting, or is there a strategy here?
Oh, it's a calculated risk. Sikorski knows Musk is reactive.
Very reactive.
So by poking the bear publicly, he draws global attention to a very specific problem that's been sort of flying under the radar.
Which is the alleged Russian use of Starlink.
Exactly. He's forcing Musk to address it by bruising his ego.
And naturally, Musk did not let that slide.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Musk replies with what the reports call his characteristic bluntness. And by bluntness...
Which is a polite way of saying it.
A very polite way.
Sure.
By bluntness, they mean he just went straight for the jugular. He tweeted back, "This drooling moron doesn't even realize that Starlink is the backbone of Ukraine's military communications."
Drooling moron.
I mean, just wow. We are talking about the owner of a major defense contractor talking to a high-ranking European diplomat. It's almost surreal.
It certainly breaks every single rule of traditional diplomacy. But if you strip away the insult, which is, hard to do...
It's very hard.
Musk is making a defensive point that he believes is valid. He's claiming that without Starlink, Ukraine's military comms would collapse. He sees himself as the savior here.
But let's push back on that for a second. Is he right? Is Starlink still the backbone?
Technically, yeah. When the invasion began in 2022, Russia effectively wiped out Ukraine's local infrastructure. Cell towers, fiber optics.
They were all targeted or jammed?
Exactly. Starlink, being a constellation of thousands of satellites, is much, much harder to kill. It allowed Ukrainian units to stay connected, coordinate artillery. I mean, he isn't wrong about the historical value.
But here is where it gets really interesting. This isn't the first time they've gone at it, is it?
No, not at all. Our sources point back to March 2025. This feud has been simmering for about a year.
Okay, so what happened then?
Back then, Musk issued a warning, basically, that Ukraine's front line was going to collapse without Starlink.
Which sounds like a factual assessment, but in the world of high-stakes negotiations, tone is everything, right?
Tone is everything. It sounded almost like a threat, or at least a reminder of how much leverage he held. Sort of a, nice army you have there, be a shame if the internet went out.
And Sikorsky didn't take well to that either, I'm guessing.
Not at all. He threatened to find alternative providers, and Musk's reaction then was just as personal. He called Sikorsky a little man, and this is a very specific charge, a puppet of investor George Soros.
Ah, the Soros line. A classic. So we have this history. Musk sees Sikorsky as this ungrateful puppet, and Sikorsky sees Musk as this unreliable, potentially dangerous liability.
Exactly. They are oil and water. But while it's easy to get distracted by the name-calling, drooling moron, we have to pivot to the valid question Sikorsky is actually raising.
Which is Russia actually using Starlink?
That's the core of it.
Yeah, let's get into the battlefield reality here, because Sikorsky didn't just pull that out of thin air. If Russia is using the same tech as Ukraine, doesn't that effectively neutralize Ukraine's advantage?
It absolutely does, and the reports are deeply concerning. Sources have been circulating since as far back as 2023, saying that Russian forces may be obtaining Starlink terminals.
But wait, how? Starlink is a U.S. company. They aren't supposed to be selling to Russia, right?
Right.
Sanctions and all that.
Correct. They aren't buying them directly from SpaceX. The theory is that they are getting them through illicit channels, third-party sellers, smuggling routes through nations that haven't sanctioned Russia. It's like a black market for war tech.
So they get the hardware physically, but can't SpaceX just, turn them off? Don't they know where the dishes are?
That is the technical hurdle. It is incredibly difficult. Geofencing, creating a digital border, is really tricky on a shifting front line. If you turn off service in Russian-occupied territory, you might actually be blinding Ukrainian troops who are advancing into that territory. It's a messy, imprecise science.
And that ambiguity is where all this tension lies. But why now? Why is Sikorsky bringing this up with such urgency?
That brings us to one of our other sources, a snapshot from the Cult podcast context, and it paints a really, really grim picture of what's happening on the ground right now.
I saw this. The reports mention a Trump-brokered truce, which, theoretically implies a pause in fighting.
Theoretically. But the report says that President Zelensky is accusing Russia of violating that truce. And not just with small arms fire, but with a terrorizing attack on the energy grid.
And the weather conditions mentioned. Yikes.
Minus 20 degrees Celsius.
That is life-threatening cold, even if you have heating.
Precisely. So you have a deep freeze, a failing energy grid because of these attacks, and a truce that isn't holding. And in modern warfare, how do you execute precise attacks on power plants? How do you coordinate during a freezing blackout?
Drones.
Drones. And what do drones need? Consistent, high-bandwidth communication.
Right, to send video back to the operator.
Exactly. So if Russian forces are indeed using illicit Starlink terminals to coordinate these very strikes during a humanitarian crisis, then Sikorsky's anger makes a whole lot more sense. It reframes the whole thing. He's not just trolling Musk. He's reacting to an immediate threat to civilian life.
It adds a whole new layer of weight to that making money from war crimes comment, doesn't it? It's not abstract anymore. And leaving the control of that weapon in the hands of a private company, one that gets into Twitter fights with diplomats, is just, it's becoming untenable for Europe.
Which is the perfect segue, because Europe isn't just sitting around complaining, they are making moves.
Big moves. So let's talk about this announcement from the European Space Conference. This feels like the grown-ups finally entering the room.
It really does. While the Twitter feud was grabbing all the headlines, the European Union announced it has activated parts of its own secure satellite network.
Okay, so who's the face of this pivot?
The central figure is Andrius Kubilius. He's the Commissioner for Defense and Space. And he laid out the activation of two networks, IRIS-2 and GoviSatcom.
IRIS-2 and GoviSatcom. Okay, those are definitely EU bureaucratic names.
They don't have quite the same ring as Starlink, no.
Not quite. But what do they actually do?
Well, Kubilius stated that limited operations have already begun. So this isn't just a plan on a piece of paper anymore. The hardware is actually turning on.
And what's the promise? What is he selling to the member states?
He was very, very clear on the value proposition. I want to read his quote because the wording is so specific. He said, "All member states can now have access to sovereign satellite communications, military and government, secure and encrypted, built in Europe, operated in Europe, under European control."
Built in Europe, operated in Europe. He's really hammering that home. It sounds like a declaration of independence.
It is. The operative word there is sovereign.
Right.
It's a direct response to this whole Musk situation. If you are relying on U.S. technology, specifically tech controlled by one volatile private citizen, you don't have sovereignty.
You have a subscription service that can be throttled or canceled.
Or a service where the CEO might call your foreign minister a drooling moron in the middle of a crisis.
A terrifying prospect for a defense minister.
Absolutely. You can't build a national security strategy on that. Kubilius is offering an alternative, a system where the off switch is in Brussels, not in Texas or California.
And it seems like there's an immediate customer. The sources mention Ukraine has already requested access.
And that is a crucial detail. Ukraine knows better than anyone the risks here. They need redundancy. They need a backup plan.
They don't want all their eggs in one basket.
Especially when the basket owner is fighting with their allies.
So if we zoom out, what does this all mean? Is this a breakup of the traditional alliance structures?
I think we're seeing a strategic shift in how the West thinks about defense. For a long time, there was this sense that commercial tech, Silicon Valley tech, could just be plugged into military needs.
Right. Why build your own expensive system when you can just use Starlink? It's faster, it's cheaper.
Exactly. But this whole experience has exposed the flaw in that thinking, and that flaw is dependence. The phrasing in the reports, reduce dependence on U.S. technology, is very, very telling.
It's interesting because usually when Europe talks about reducing dependence, they're talking about Russian gas or Chinese manufacturing.
But here they're talking about American tech. Specifically American private tech. It's a realization that even your allies can have divergent interests.
Or in this case, a single private citizen can.
Right.
But this independence, it doesn't come cheap, does it?
No. Sovereignty is expensive. The full system is a $10.6 billion investment.
$10.6 billion. That's real money.
It is. But they've decided the cost of not having it is even higher.
And what about the timeline? Because if I'm a soldier on the front line in minus 20-degree weather, I don't care about a satellite launching in 5 years. I care about right now.
And that is the catch. The full system is expected to be fully operational by 2030.
2030. That is a long time in geopolitical terms.
It's a lifetime. And this is the trade-off. Starlink is here now. It works now. It saved the day in 2022. But it comes with all this baggage. The EU alternative is secure and sovereign, but it's expensive, and it's still just ramping up.
So it feels like Europe is trying to build a fire station while the house is already smoking.
That's a good analogy. They're realizing they should have built it 10 years ago, but they're starting now.
So for the immediate future, despite all the insults, the drooling moron comments, they are kind of stuck with each other.
They are. It's a messy, uncomfortable marriage of convenience. Ukraine needs Starlink. Musk probably enjoys the influence, and Europe is just scrambling to change the equation.
And it highlights a new reality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We used to think of arms dealers as these shadowy figures selling rifles from a truck. Now, the most powerful arms dealer in the world might be a guy posting memes on a social media platform he owns, controlling internet access for entire armies.
It completely upends the traditional hierarchy of international relations. A foreign minister has to publicly beg or threaten a CEO to get strategic results. That's not how the world used to work.
So let's wrap this up. We started with the Twitter beef.
And we ended up with a $10 billion satellite project.
Yeah. We saw how a personal feud between Musk and Sikorsky is really just the surface noise.
Underneath, there's a deadly serious conflict about drone warfare, freezing populations, and the desperate need for reliable communication.
And the response is this silent, massive shift of military power into space, with Europe trying to carve out its own slice of the sky.
Precisely. It's a move from convenience to sovereignty. And it's costing them billions, but they've decided the price of dependence is even higher.
It really makes you think about who is actually in charge.
It does.
You know, we always like to leave you with something to chew on, something to maybe keep you up at night just a little bit.
Here's the question I'm left with. We are moving into an era where the backbone of military communications, the nervous system of modern war, is owned by private companies.
Right. Not the state. Shareholders.
So if a private company controls that nervous system, do they essentially hold veto power over international conflicts? Can a CEO just decide a war is over by flipping a switch because it's bad for his brand?
And if that's the case.
Can a state ever truly be secure if its off switch is held by a private citizen in another country?
That is a terrifying thought. Veto power over war held by a private citizen. I guess we're going to find out.
It seems so.
Well, on that cheerful note, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Stay curious.